So Scott Freitag starting over.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's been an exciting year already. New president. You got a new life.
A lot of new stuff happening. I mean, look at the facial hair.
It looks
31
good.
years emergency services.
You got more
do
up
it.
top, but I just shaved all of mine off. But I think I'm going to bring it back because I'm going skiing next month, and I don't want my face to be cold. So.
Right. I haven't trimmed this one or done anything with it since starting September 24th of last year. I was like, I don't have to shave.
Are you going to go? Are you going to go long, or you're like goat like, or?
I don't know what it's going to do. I just want to wait and see. Somebody said the other day, "Hey, I can trim that up for you," and I'm like, "Nah, I want to see what happens."
Well, I think the wife has the last laugh on that.
She
right?
does. She will.
Okay. Well, before we start, I just want to give a shout out to we lost somebody that meant something to me, and I usually don't get into these things, but former Mayor Rolle Simmons passed recently. Really good dude. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to tell a story on why he was my mayor as we talk about starting fresh. I moved here in 2004, and I didn't know anybody, but I had a business plan. And so one day I decided some free time, and I just walked into Prescott City Hall. And this is, again, 2004. We were still a little sleepy back then.
Right.
And literally there was nobody in there. The mayor greeted me. He said, "Come back into my office." And so Mayor Simmons brought me back into his office, and we ended up just shooting the bull about Prescott for about a half hour. He asked what my plans were. It turns out that part of my business plan and my services that we were going to provide fit perfectly with some of their needs. And they were putting out an RFQ, a request for quotation from companies. And he goes, "What are you going to do?" I go, "Well, I've been leveraging my marketing background. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of focus groups and just started talking. And it was the same thing. This is back before our wonderful ocean blue that we all take for granted now. And I got a subscription and use them all. There were no car washes. And the one that there was, you had to wait an hour. I sat there. Remember that one off of, was it Iron Springs?
I remember, I know one is off there, but I didn't move here until
no
2013.
Longer there. Yeah. So there were no car washes. There weren't a lot of reliable carpet cleaners. There was no pressure washing. And we live up here and there was a lot of dust and pollen.
Right.
And so I developed these mobile rigs. It was called Tri-City Mobile Wash. And this was when it was Tri-Cities, not Quad Cities.
Right.
And we did everything from hot pressure washing to auto detailing to fleet cleaning to carpet cleaning. And a good day, I'd call them grand slams, where we spent all day at somebody's home. We would detail both cars, pressure wash the driveway, and then the wife wanted some rugs cleaned or stairs, and I'd have crews there all day. I ended up winning that contract. Steve Norwood was the city manager.
Okay.
He came into the office as well. We all just talked. I walked out with an RFQ. And 2 weeks later, I have a contract with a municipality. I'm working. We're breaking even in the first 2 months. And the rest is history. And this is also when the chambers really worked well. Jules Holsgraf was the chamber director for the city of Prescott. She took me by the hand in her car to the different businesses that had fleets that needed help. Okay. And one of the first people she introduced me to was Linda Thine, who was the director of the casinos at the time. So we picked up a fleet from Buc-ee's to clean on a monthly basis. We were cleaning the square sidewalks on a monthly basis, and the rest was history. So we talk about doing something new that you don't expect. I went from a kind of a corporate job to a cleaning services company, but it was in Prescott.
Right.
And I was living in God's country. I just made a change, got lucky. So I owe all of that and to where I am at now working with the Fane Group because of a guy named Rolle Simmons, who I always called my mayor, even when he became supervisor with the county, because of what he did. I mean, where can he, and that's why I moved to a smaller town, was that attitude and that spirit that I couldn't have walked into LA County Council and say, "Hey, this is what I'm doing." They all like say, "Take off."
Yeah.
So that was Mayor Rolle Simmons.
And I met Rolle when I moved here, and because he did a lot of communications work over the years. As a matter of fact, some of the people that work in the tech services division at my former employer were employees of Rolle's, and he did some work with the fire departments back then. And then, but I hadn't seen him for a few years, and I was disappointed to hear and saddened to hear that he had passed. I wasn't aware that he had been ill, but when I think back on it, it's been several years since I've seen him, but what a good man and a great community servant, and a significant loss for everyone.
Definitely a real deal. I mean,
Yes.
I rarely say that, especially about politicians, right? And he was
Right.
just the greatest dude, and really embodied the spirit of the town and our communities. And I was bummed to hear that too. It was too young, too fast.
So you talked about you being in corporate. When we were talking a little bit ago at lunch,
Yep.
you said, I had a degree from a university. I was in corporate. A little bit more about you. What you said you were running a division within a company?
Yeah. So back in San Diego, back in the day, I was hired by a Korean company. They were all Koreans.
Okay.
They had manufacturing facilities in Korea. They made the small components for the back of TVs, the ISDN units or the AV connectors, audio video connectors. And then they had a maquilador, which was a kind of a way station. They also did some manufacturing there in Tijuana.
Okay.
And I was living in San Diego, and through a friend of a friend, they were looking to start a consumer products division, American division, leveraging their Asian manufacturing facilities. They had one in Incheon, and they had a couple in China to bring in consumer products. They wanted to penetrate the American consumer products markets. And I started doing that. I'd go to Tijuana every day in a suit because they love three-piece suits.
Right.
In the heat. And this is just before the cartel's getting kind of wonky down there. It was pretty safe, great tacos, and would do that. But then one day, it's just San Diego, the hustle and bustle. My mom had moved up here, so I came up to visit her, and it reminded my wife of Boulder, Colorado, a little bit. Where she grew up there, and the rest is kind of history. But getting back to, I think the question is, I was just so excited to make a change.
Yeah.
It didn't matter to me what I had to do. I was going to do it because I knew it was going to lead to other great things. That's exactly what happened. I met a lot of people and just created a database of all my contacts those few years that I was in the cleaning business. I started getting involved with the airport, started flying over there as a low-time general aviation pilot. And I started doing a marketing newsletter because I wanted to find people to fly with. And that became flyprescott.com, which I ended up giving that URL to the city. And then from there, a guy named John Stonecipher called me and said, hey, can you do for us what you're doing for the airport? Because I created a website with a fly-in schedule, fly-out schedule, advertisers. And that led into reinventing myself again. Yeah. And that was really the democratization of marketing and advertising. Facebook 2008, 2009, constant contact newsletters, that all was during that time. And then next thing you know, with a group over there at Guidance Aviation running a pretty big marketing effort, very successful one that John was the architect of. Fast forward to now, we have a really successful positive news network through the Fane Group,
Which
Signals
is
AZ.
different for news network.
What's
right?
that?
For getting news out, something that's positive.
Yep.
It's hard to do that.
Hard to do that. A lot of learning online, all self-taught because it was all new stuff, just like with the AI stuff now, which I'm sure somehow we'll get into because every conversation there is something about AI in it. But it was all about starting new. I've done that twice now in my life. And every time that second time was even better than the first because you learned so much about
Yeah.
what to do. And for young people, what it really comes down to is you just have to be passionate about it and want to do the hard work.
Absolutely.
That's
You have
what
to
it
put the
comes down
time
to.
in, have the vision, perseverance and triumph, right? You just keep pushing. And the opportunities up here really are endless. And the networks that you make, the things that can help you get to where you need to be successful for you.
Yep. So big changes for you.
Big
Segueing
changes.
back to you.
Yes.
For those that don't know, especially the young folks that do listen to this, if you want to give a brief background or where you're coming from,
Sure.
the change and what you're looking to do now.
So I just finished 31 years in emergency services. And when I say I just finished it, didn't finish quite the way that I had hoped, but I spent 31 years serving communities in Missouri around the St. Louis area. And then the last 11 years and 2 months, according to LinkedIn. Here, I would have said around 11 years, but LinkedIn's like it's 11 years and 2 months. And 10 years and 9 months of it were absolutely fantastic. It had the ups and downs. We built, we created, we supported people, we expanded services. We did a lot of things for the community in building Central Arizona Fire and Medical Authority, created efficiencies, and it was fantastic. And I thought that would be where I finished my career. And sometimes things happen that are out of our control.
Yep.
We make plans, but God is the one who has the plan for you. And whether you think this is the direction you're supposed to go or not, he's got the plan. And it's not that he lets evil things happen. In my case, my contract was terminated without cause. There was a whole brouhaha thing with the state union and a lot of lies and disinformation that were out there that really tried to discredit me. And their stated goal was to ruin my reputation and livelihood. And so the end of the day, I mentioned to my wife last night, I said, I just lost a job. And she goes, you didn't lose a job, you lost a career. I'm like, that's true. And while the evil things happen, because they do, God still has a plan to get you through it. And so I've had a sense of peace. Yeah, I felt lost. Yes, I felt anger because of what was done. But I always felt like there's something out there for me. And my fallback was, well, I know government, so I guess I'll try to do that. So I started putting in for city manager positions in different places, assistant city manager positions. And then I thought, you know what? I've never tried the private sector. That might be kind of cool.
We talked about this a little bit. Yeah.
And so I was putting in for the private sector. And of course, while I have a lot of background and folks don't necessarily understand how a fire chief can correlate to a business side of things, but ran a big budget, created a lot of things.
It's a pretty big organization, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big business.
We accomplish things that government agencies don't normally do because we applied basic business principles to a government entity. So I was out, and then I found out, and I'm just going to put it out there, I found out that if you Google search my name, it's not good. Apparently, the union did a press push after my contract was terminated without cause, and the news media in Phoenix picked it up. But what they failed to pick up was the phone to call me and get the other side of the story. They simply ran with what the union said, and so that's what you see. And in media, they're not going to back off what they put out there and admit that they didn't do their due diligence. So that kind of hurts you when you're looking for a position. And I said, you know what? I may not be hireable in a lot of places, but I'm willing to hire me. So what can I do?
Right.
And so I started with talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
I gave you a phone call and said, hey, we did this podcast. That's the one positive thing that comes up right now. So we talked about the potential of a leadership podcast. Mm-hmm. And then I mentioned to you that I was looking at a consulting company. So I have that in the works. I'm just waiting for the website to be done.
Yep.
I'm going to share the name of it with you because the last big emergency event that I responded to and was part of the incident command was the Legato fire.
Yep.
And Brad and Ron had a beautiful piece made that they gave me after I lost my position.
It was a brick
inlaid into a piece of 4x4
from the Legato fire.
Right. I was sitting there one Friday afternoon. I think I spent 6 hours trying to come up with a name. Even random letters, people had it because consulting is everywhere. Out of frustration, I just kind of leaned back in my chair and I turned and I saw that piece and I'm like, legado. Pretty sure that means legacy in Spanish. Looked it up. It did. I kept looking for different names, but it kept coming back to me. And I love the compass, the idea of the compass. So I wanted to use something with points or point, right? Uh-huh. Cardinal points are the main points of a compass. And I put legato and point together, directional legacy.
Right.
And came up with legato point consulting, which nobody had. And so that's in process. Went to a website called Fiverr. Never heard of this stuff.
Yep.
Where you can find people. They create a logo for me. Abhi over in India is working on my
Abhi.
He's
everybody
awesome.
knows Abhi.
We did a video chat. Very cool guy. He's working on the website, and I thought, all right, I'll get this out there, right? And then recently, a friend of my wife and I's, he actually went to high school with my wife. He owned a company called JSO Contracting,
mm-hmm.
and his business partners, he had bought them out, so it was just him, and he was thinking, you know what, I don't know if I can continue doing this, and so he called me and said, hey, can you make an introduction to Fane Signature for me? I'm like, yeah, let me call Anessa and see if I can hook you up with a phone call so you can talk to her.
Lady Builder Boss is what I call her.
Anessa's awesome. Amazing. And so they chatted. The next week, he had some interviews with Haley Construction, another great company in town.
Outstanding outfit.
And he was talking to me. He's like, I think I'm just going to shut it down. And that Saturday, he came over for dinner with his wife to our house, and we chatted. And then the next morning, he came back to use Close Enough Garage to do some brakes on his wife's car. And
That's a hilarious, sorry for the hilarious sticker you had.
Oh, yeah.
Misspelled and kind of off.
On my Jeep,
embodies Close Enough.
Yeah, Close Enough. That's it. That's on the hood of my Jeep now, where it would say Rubicon. It says Close Enough.
We'll have to bring that up for that. I want to get a picture from the Close Enough Garage. We'll put it in this podcast.
So Close Enough Garage, precision is not our priority there. But he's out there and he looks at me and goes, hey, man, it hit me this morning. I don't want to give up my dream of owning and operating my own business, and you don't have a job. And I'm like, hey, thanks for pointing that out. Right. I know I don't have a job, but I'm working on it.
It's always about other people, dude.
Yeah. And he said, why don't we go into business together? Why don't you become part of this? And I said, listen, that sounds great. He goes, we could get into building specs. He already has 2 contractor licenses, one for excavation and grading, the other one for demo. And he's like, I'll get my license so that with general contracting license, we can build residential, commercial. And I'm like, we could go to real estate school, Jen and I, and then we could acquire properties and sell properties in-house. So it's a turnkey. I said, but you're going to have to talk to Jen, because every good idea that I bring gets killed immediately. Right. So I'm like, you talk to her, I'm standing back here.
Right.
And he went to her and she said, you know what? I like this idea. This is great. And so we started talking and we bought into the company, JSO Contracting and Demolition. And one of the first things that I did, one of the first jobs I was on, was helping demo just a double wide that was in Prescott. One of the best times I've ever had.
What boy doesn't want to get in a tractor and demo something?
I know. I'm driving a dump truck. It's a mini dump truck, I'll give you that. But I'm driving a dump truck.
I was on a backhoe front loader all weekend. I was on a Case 510.
Okay.
Pretty big. Fully enclosed though, because I'm 60 now. So whatever heavy equipment I operate must have fully enclosed air and heating. Bluetooth doesn't hurt either.
Little music.
So they are so fun. They wear you out, but I have a lot of enjoyment working on our property, and I had to fix our roads because they got washed out a while back, and So we got some non-spec AB, and then you got to flatten it. It takes you about an hour to figure out all the levers. You knock
Right.
over a few things along the way. I hit a fence once. But I totally get it. Starting over
Yeah.
can be so exciting. I think some people are afraid of it, but to me, it's like, it's looking around the corner and there's so much opportunity.
And I feel good about this. I don't have apprehension about what we can accomplish moving forward. And like I said, Jen and I start real estate school February 5th online so that we can bring that piece to the business. I'm doing my OSHA 30 so I can supervise construction sites, even at federal facilities. We bought a skid steer.
Nice.
I mean,
I'll operate that for you.
Yeah, it's a Caterpillar skid steer.
Yep.
It's one step below the biggest one that they make. It's tracked. It's a used one. It's enclosed.
Yeah.
Heating and air conditioning. I have zero idea how to run it, but my business partner has 30 years running heavy equipment, any piece of heavy equipment he can operate. And I've been told that I shouldn't get into the equipment, that I should just let my wife learn how to run it because nobody thinks they could trust me with it.
Yeah.
But, if you look at my background in the fire service, I do have a little background with demolition.
A little bit. Yeah.
I mean,
deconstruction, maybe.
Yeah. I maybe didn't
pun
cause
intended.
the situation to happen, but I certainly helped guide it into a giant pile.
Well, I think the process is pretty much the same in your experience with that organization. The only difference between that and private is that it was a political position. You managed and ran and grew an organization, employees, and had a mission.
Right.
It's no different than any other business. The only exception is I would, from my vantage point, it's a very political position that you're answering to political individuals that are driven by, political motives as well as requirements.
Right.
I think that would be the only difference.
Well, and on this will be the first time that I'm my own boss and we get to set direction. And one of the things I'm really excited about with this is that my wife is part of it. And so we actually get to share in what's happening during the day. We get to share in creating something with some close friends of ours.
That
we get
sounds
to work
fun.
together.
That sounds fun.
Tomorrow we're going out. My wife and I are going out to a job site that my partner's on today with our laborer, and he's like, "Listen, this is going slower. Just need some help cleaning up these pavers and getting them stacked." I'm like, "We're there." And you know what? That sounds like a fun day to me.
That's the best thing too. Is there's days where you're tired, but you've met your goals, and you fire yourself on that day or that half day. And but there's days that you're motivated. It could be a weekend. You got nothing else to do. You go to work because you like it. I find myself doing work sometimes when I can't sleep at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm doing it for myself.
That's one of the things that is different here. For 11 years and 2 months with the fire department here as the fire chief, I made it a hard stop at between 9:30 at night. That's when I would stop working. And then, I'd get up and go back at it again the next day. And we're on job sites, and he's like, "Okay, well, we stop at 4 o'clock." I'm like, "Well, what do we do with the rest of the evening?"
Your wife's looking at you going,
"Isn't there something?" And I'm like, "Well, we can get this over the weekend." And he's like, "No, we don't work weekends." I'm like, "Well, what do we do?" I'm not clear
You
on
have
this.
to adjust to that.
Yeah.
You have to adjust to a 50, 60-hour work week, maybe.
Yeah. And, it's a better life balance, not just work-life balance, but life balance. I've had our little mini dump truck that I'm working on in close enough garage. It's in the shop. It fits. That tells you how big it is. But I'm welding steel panels into the back of this thing. And so
I got to come over for welding lessons. I'll do the work for free. You just got to supervise me.
Oh, I'm not good at it.
Okay.
These are a step above agricultural welds, but well below professional welding.
Okay. I guess agricultural welds are what I see on my pipe welding at our ranch.
Yeah, those
I'm
are
guessing.
the booger welds. They'll hold, but they're ugly.
Close enough?
Yeah, close
Okay.
enough. But, the dump truck needed some work, and I'm like, well, this is something I can't run heavy equipment, but I can weld,
Right.
and I can fix this stuff. And so, and it's also allowed us to help keep our labor busy when we had downtime and didn't have work, because typically in the construction industry, if there's no work, you just don't work and you don't get paid.
Right.
And we understand that, this one individual that works for us counts on that money coming in,
Right.
so that he can live. And by us telling him, well, we don't have work for the next several days,
it's a little different.
him.
That's a little different than a public position, right?
Correct.
Where you got the budget and the taxpayer
Right.
supporting it. It's 24/7's coming in. As an entrepreneur,
Right.
You're thinking 90 to 180 days out minimum to keep your people
Right.
employed. That's different as well.
And we just had him come over to my house, and we were out in the shop working on the dump truck together, so that we could keep him working, because that's important. I believe in taking care of your employees. I did that in my last position, and that's what I want to continue doing here, is making sure anybody that we bring in, we're bringing them into a good company that cares about the folks that work with us.
Yeah.
And but like you said, starting over. I'm 54 years old, and I'm in a new career. I look at my fire helmet that's sitting next to my Legato art piece that Ron and Brad had done, and I don't feel a terrible sense of loss. I feel like in 31 years in emergency services, it was a good run, and I accomplished a lot in my career, and I'm very proud of what I've done.
It's never lost on me as I get older that some of the best times in your life are full of this kind of strange irony. You could look at what has just happened to you, which was very close to the Legato fire incident, right? So I think you probably are putting them both together in your mind, maybe a little bit, at least I am. But the end is really a beginning.
Yeah.
And like all the contacts that you have are contacts now for your future, and you're starting to have these epiphanies on how all this is coming together in a good way. And we had this conversation, and it led me to want to ask you, and I'm not changing the subject, I think it's within this, is when we talk about starting over, you and I had chatted about, because of your deep experience with the fire community and just fires and those things in general, about the Palisades fire in the West Coast. And talking about that a little bit, I think the first thing that you and I were talking about is this lack of compassion.
Absolutely.
That we were seeing in the media or people in general. I wanted to get some of your comments on that because of your expertise. What is your opinion on what happened? Because I don't trust the media. I'm in it. And you have a wide range of opinions on, well, it's because they didn't have any water, or it was the electricity, or it was the demand, or it was the 100-mile-an-hour winds that nobody could stop a fire with winds like that. What's your overall big take on what went down?
So I think the first one is, and I unfriended someone on social media immediately when I read one of their posts, just disparaging the people of California and wishing ill will on them.
Yeah.
And, that's just, it completely lacks any level of compassion. And when you and I talked, and I made a post on LinkedIn, and I did one on social media about this, it doesn't matter what you think of the politics of the state of California. It doesn't matter whether or not you like elite people, whether they're actors, actresses, or just wealthy folks. They're still people, and they're suffering, and they have a time of need right now. And wishing death and destruction on them is just absolutely inappropriate. It's wrong, right? And so, first and foremost, I saw some evil coming out of people in their approach to that. So compassion, number one. And my view on it is, listen, there's going to be a lot of blame to go around at the end of the day.
Right.
But right now, you have no expertise in this, and yet you're saying, well, it's because of they didn't have water, or this, they didn't have this. Listen, let the fires, let them take care of them, and then there's going to be an after action. And when the after action is complete, you'll have a really good idea of where exactly the blame should lie. You remember when social media and the internet were supposed to be like, we're going to be a lot smarter because this stuff's out here. That's clearly not the case.
No.
And so when we look at the fires and how fast they moved, yes, we can look at California and say years of bad policy on forest management, but not just in California. That was nationally, years of bad policy. Arizona over the years has started to adapt and change because naturally the forests were more clear and healthier when fires were used as a tool, whether it was a lightning strike or whatever it was, to help clear that forest floor so it wasn't overgrown. Now, they've just been allowed to grow and grow and grow, and what we have are unhealthy forests. We have a lot of growth, and overgrowth leads to a lot more dry fuels when we have a situation like you see in the Palisades. And then you have more and more people moving into that wildland-urban interface. So you're in it, and it's all overgrown around you. It's been said that California has some really stringent policies on how to maintain vegetation around your home. Policies are great if you follow them.
Well, a lot of my family is from those areas. My wife's family, Brentwood specifically, I think the fire was maybe 0.27 miles away as the crow flies. They got very fortunate, but 2 homes there that had to be evacuated. But just what we walk there when we visit her mother, and it's so thick.
Yeah.
The streets are very thin. The houses are very close together, hillsides, but just trees and shrubs and bushes, and they're all packed in together. It's beautiful.
Right.
It's like a jungle, but it's in Southern California with Santa Ana winds. They had that 100-year storm. We were in that on its heaviest night because I remember where we went.
Right.
And where we went actually had the most rainfall of that region that night. I couldn't believe what we were driving through. And the rain didn't stop for weeks.
Right.
And so imagine that played a role because all that vegetation that grew from those rains.
Oh, yeah.
And then you had the whole spring and summer for it to flourish. I think it was 9 months later, you've got these fires combined with
high
50
winds
to 100 mile an hour winds. When does a firefighter become an observer? Isn't there a threshold there with the winds?
I'm not familiar with a wind threshold, but I can tell you that 100 mile an hour winds were not stopping the fire from moving.
Yeah.
And you saw a video of firefighters
even
pointing,
with water, by the way, right? I mean,
Yeah.
your lines probably aren't even working effectively if you have 100 mile an hour winds.
The water, if you're trying to spray a fire hose into the wind, you're just getting wet
Right.
behind it.
That's why they say don't pee into the wind, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
because that's exactly it. Because the wind is blowing that back on you. And you shared on LinkedIn a very good podcast from Mike Rowe, and I listened to part of it this
what about
morning.
bass?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's a great podcast, everybody. It's not what you think it's about. It's a little over an hour long. Highly recommend you listen to it.
it's very, very informative. And one of the things one of the gentlemen talked about was the water, right?
I think it's Edward Ring, like the director. I'll pull it up, like the director of California Water and Energy Policy.
He said even if the reservoir was full, when you open every fire hydrant, you're not going to have pressure. And the reality is when you open every fire hydrant, you're going to run out of water, right? The municipal water systems are built for a few fires at a time, not a complete conflagration where your entire city is on fire.
Right.
Right? It's not going to work. And an example of that is the Legato fire, going back to that. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I spoke with Gilbert, the town manager for Prescott Valley, and just said, hey, can you please get a hold of the water department, have them divert the water pressure to this area so we don't lose it. It's the middle of the night. There's typically nobody up, so you can divert that water to there, and we never lost pressure. That was one building. Now, granted, it was a very big building, took up a block, but now use that on the same municipal water system, but have the entire town of Prescott Valley on fire. How long is that water going to last?
And the wind.
It's not.
Everything.
And the wind.
We had a little bit of rain that night. We had a great team on it and great coordination with the town, because I know you guys were saying, hey, we need to divert these tanks, because I know you guys were, and that's just one building and we were blowing through those tanks, right?
We blew through a lot of water
that night. Was just one. I mean, yeah, it was over 300 units.
Right.
One building that was dense. It was in one block.
I think it was Palisades, 6,800 structures. And the Eaton fire, 9,418 structures are the latest numbers.
The scope is insane.
There's not much you're going to do with that. It's a wind-driven event with overgrowth, with dry fuels, and you have homes that weren't built to withstand in the wildland-urban interface.
What's your experience and your opinion on? I know there's embers, because I remember with the Legato fire, I think people brought into the office some like huge chunks that were taken well over a mile away.
Yeah.
Right. Now look at what has occurred or still burning, but I think 95% plus contained.
96% on Palisades and 99% on Eaton.
Right. So imagine the embers from there. I could see them starting fires. Do you think there's anything with arson involved with any of those at all? As an add-on, like it might have started naturally or from a utility. We don't know. Mm-hmm. Again, you don't know who to believe at this point, but you think there was any arson involved?
That I really can't speak to. I don't know. There seem to be more fires popping up. So is there a possibility that something could have happened elsewhere, a copycat? We've seen that before. I'm not saying it happened here, but we've seen that happen before.
Right.
They still don't know what caused the Palisades fire. But if you think about it, that night here we had 20-mile-an-hour winds for Legato, and it carried embers upwards of 2 miles. So now you have a bigger fire in Palisades and Eaton. You have 100-mile-an-hour winds, and everything's dry. Right. How far are those embers actually traveling at that point? And now you get a big ember, but it's landing in a big, dry pile of thick brush.
Right. And I've been up in some of those mountains. It's really just bone dry.
Right.
Right. Makes for great tinder. It makes for a great fire starter.
So, and this is, when you look at the fires today in California, you look at the policies for years that have led to some of the challenges that they have, there's going to have to be policy changes. Now, granted, hey, all the fuels are gone now. It all burned up. It doesn't take long for that stuff to grow back. And one of the things I learned, because we've talked about this before, Guy, I moved here from St. Louis. So when you talk to me about wildfire 11 years ago when I moved here, I'm like, I don't know. The trees are on fire. Let me know if it gets to a structure, right? I don't know what to do with this side. Over the years, I've learned more. But one of the things they said to me when I first got here, they're like, wow, it's been super dry. This is going to be a bad wildfire year. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. The next year, they're like, man, we've had a lot of monsoons this year, a lot of rain. This is going to be a bad wildfire season. I'm like, wait a second. Last year you said drought, bad. This year you're saying water, bad. Which is it? And they're like, both.
Every year.
Because when it rains, then all the fine fuels grow up.
Sounds like quickly. It's a policy issue then, not a weather issue.
Then it dries out, and now we have more fuels to burn. And if we're in drought, then everything's a tinderbox. And when forests are unhealthy and all the trees are trying to fight for the same ground nutrients that are very limited in the same water, now you do have more diseased trees and more dead trees, leading to more fuel and more issues in the forests. Like I said, I believe that in Arizona, they've changed policies. They're trying to manage it, but you're talking about decades.
Yeah, and they're doing a lot of prescribed burns all the time. I never, ever experienced or ever saw them in Southern California. It doesn't mean they didn't happen,
right?
But you see them here. It's normal. We publish every time it's a prescribed burn. We publish that information so people know it's not a wildfire. And if you're downwind of it, it can be disturbing, but it's a normal thing up here.
It is, and this goes back to the human factor in some of these things. So when we talk about policies for keeping vegetation away from your home, right? If you go into the wildland urban interface, there's best practices, and you don't want trees within 5 feet and all of this. But if, let's say, I was a code enforcement person and I came to your house, yours isn't a good example because you have goats and they eat everything. But
we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, but if you, if I came to your house as a code enforcement person, said, "Listen, you can't have that tree within this distance to your house, and these bushes are off." I mean, they're not overgrown; they don't look bad; they're just too close. And I tell you, Guy, you have 2 weeks to cut them down. If you don't, I'm coming back. How long do you think it would take before you would vote the people in office out to ensure that code enforcement was no longer bothering you at your house for your personal property? I mean, it's not going to take long. People want to have their own stuff. They have the right to have their stuff. But then when there's a fire and their house burns because that stuff was too close, they want to blame someone.
Right.
And that's one of the challenges. And with the prescribed burns, if we didn't do them, we had a fire come in and burn a lot of the community up and take some houses out, people would complain that it was bad policy, bad management of the forests. And then when they manage the forests, people are upset because, well, now there's smoke. Well, pick and choose,
Right.
folks, right? Things have to happen. And it's no different right now in California with the electric companies. They're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. If they shut the power off because of the high winds and they know this could be a problem, people are angry because I can't make my coffee this morning. I don't have
Or I can't see in
access
my
to
house
internet.
to get stuff out, or I can't
Right.
pump water. Yeah.
But if they leave it on and a power line blows down and it causes a significant fire, now everybody's going after the electric company. So
Which has happened. So,
you can't win.
right. So getting back to goats for a
Sure.
second, since you got a goatee. So we have this oddly strange goat rescue where I live.
Yes.
Somehow we fell into it. Having said that, we have a very Firewise property.
Yes.
Extremely. Our canopy of all our trees is 4 to 6 feet high because some goats are 2 feet high and some goats are 6 feet high. We, on our main parcel, we don't have any more scrub oak. We got rid of it. When we bought it, it was overgrown. And people think that the wood burns. It's the leaves that explode, the oils in the leaves.
Yeah.
Like the scrub
The
oak is
evergreens.
explosive. If you ever take one of those weed clearing torches with your
Right.
propane, I love those things. You could light a scrub oak with all leaves up right away. But if it doesn't have any leaves on it, those twigs or whatever, branches, whatever you want to call them, are fire resistant. It
Right.
takes them a while to get lit. Well, we don't have any of that on our main parcel. Have the departments in the past talk about using livestock like that to mitigate some of the overgrowth as opposed to burning all the time?
I think that's what you see with the BLM land, some of the state lands, some of the federal lands where they have land leases for the cows
Right.
to graze, right? Because that is another way to help keep some of those fine fuels down, is to have the
100%.
animals out there eating that.
Not to mention fertilizing,
Right.
Stirring up the soil a little bit to expose seeds for more grassland
Right.
to grow. We know that that's a beneficial thing.
Sure.
There's some great documentaries on that stuff. We see some of it.
Yes.
And obviously my wife and I pay attention. I know they used them over at the Getty because the hillsides were so steep that they used 200 goats on that hillside to eat the dry brush, which I think was very effective.
Yeah.
You can clear, in a day, you can clear an acre of brush with 125 goats in a day.
That's a lot of goats.
That's a lot of brush.
Yeah.
An acre, how many people do you think it would take to clear that? How many man hours? And
A lot.
Well, we have to pay people a living wage and benefits these days. I'm surprised that we don't see more of that type of activity using livestock and goats. And
so we just got a job with our new company. We're going to go in and we're going to help Firewise a property. We're doing some other work as well, some grading work and some rock work. But, the owner asked, hey, do you know who could do some clearing for me for wildland? And I'm like, we can do that. There's no reason we can't cut it down.
I know a goat or two you could sub out.
Yeah, but it's going to take us a lot longer than it would for the goats to take
Right.
some of that stuff back. So, yeah, I think there's definitely uses for animals in that environment, whether they're cows or goats. And, if you want to be really aggressive, just make sure you contain the goats, because my understanding is they don't just eat that stuff.
They eat everything.
They eat everything.
What we've learned is they start with what they love, and it goes down from there. So as they wipe out the scrub oak, they like pine.
Mm-hmm.
They'll destroy a pine tree. And then they'll go to the grasses. Now, having said that, they all have personalities. Some love the dry grass.
Right.
And we'll start with that. But most start with your scrub oaks and your pine, and then they move down from there. But they're trickle eaters. So it's great if you have multiple properties where you can lock them out
Sure.
and you just want to keep them, you rotate them like cattle for that matter. But if you don't, they will clean that place out, and then you might have erosion issues. So the timing's
Right.
important too. They don't wipe everything out. But I noticed that the scrub oak won't come back once they clean it out, and maybe you've hit it a couple times, which the owner may or may not like.
Right.
And then along that thought, if they really have nothing to eat, they will then go after the bark and the wood, and they will eat the actual branches and twigs from the scrub oak and clean
Mm-hmm.
it out, which is pretty much what they've done on our main parcel,
Okay.
which we're going to tier out and
Sure.
hardscape and all, make Firewise. We're lucky because we have pinyon, pine, and juniper. So we have our
Right.
own little forest and with canopies up, but it's been super effective. And I'm not plugging it because we don't offer goat rental,
Right.
because that's a whole different operation. You
Yeah.
have to have mobile fencing. You'd have to have somebody that stays with them overnight. Large guardian dogs. We have Great
Right.
Pyrenees. We have cougar everywhere. We've lost one to cougar and to coyote for that matter. So you need all these little, it's not as easy as it sounds.
You don't
and
just
it's
throw
not
the
as
goats
cheap.
out in the woods and let them clean everything.
You'd also be feeding the wildlife out there.
Right.
Right. So it's a circle of life, which is all
There you
good.
go.
I just wonder if we'll see more of that in the future because it's simpler. It's maybe a little cheaper.
Yeah.
And it may be healthier for the environment. I don't know.
And it very well could be. I think everything is a mix, right? There's not one, this will do it, right?
Right.
It's, well, we need it. The goats might work here, or running cattle on the land here, or doing this over here. And then there's still going to be logging, and there still needs to be prescribed burns. And some of them are, hey, the lightning struck, let's control it, and let's mitigate
burn.
some of the larger fuel areas and clean them up. And it was several years ago now. I think I may have only been here for a couple of years when I went to a wildfire program down in Phoenix, and they showed a picture of the forest, one of the forests in Arizona back in, I think it was the 1940s versus today. And back in the early 1900s, mid 1900s, and the forest floors were beautiful. You go out, hike through the forest because fire, cattle grazing, all of that, the forests were maintained.
Right.
And now you have people calling for us to get rid of cows because they think that they're bad for the ozone.
Right.
Right? Which is just, listen, get a grip. There are some things that we have to do to help maintain forests and the planet in general, right? But the things that they're prescribing are the policies that they've had, especially in California, those policies they've held on to for years have led them to a place now where you end up with the Paradise Fire, the Palisades Fire, the Eaton Fire, the Hughes Fire, the fires, just name them. And then after the fact, beyond that, now you've cleared all the landscape, now the monsoons come.
Yep.
And now you have the mudslides, which creates another disaster potential.
Yep. And we're already seeing it in the news, right?
Right.
With the they're heavily using the word toxic now. And I get it, they are, but that's the news. Always go with the leading lightning strike,
Sure.
whatever it is. Do you see, based on your political experience, because your job was political, do you see policies changing?
I think in California, the people of California are going to call for policy changes. They're going to be up against the environmentalists who want to ignore what just happened. But policies are going to have to change in order to prevent these things from being, from repeating themselves in the future. One of the things that will likely change that is, you see it after fires in Colorado, big fires that have taken out parts of communities, Paradise, Maui, wherever. A lot of the homes that were lost were built at a different time under different codes.
Yep.
And trying to rebuild those same homes today at the current code levels gets to be a little cost prohibitive. And so you'll likely see some of the codes be rolled back for certain properties, one, to expedite the rebuilding process, get the permits together. Two, well, you're not going to have to build to the newer standards, even though we know the newer standards are the ones that will help prevent something like this from happening in the future. There's an argument to be made on both sides, right? That it's good policy to go back and allow people to rebuild in a way that's affordable, that they can get their homes back. The other side of that, as was on Mike Rowe's podcast today, I think what they said was for every dollar spent in mitigation efforts, you save $6.
Right.
During an event, because you see homes that survived. And I use an example, and I can only go based on what I saw from the drone footage, but there was a short reel that was Tom Hanks' home saved by miracle.
Right.
And
I
so
saw this one.
I was reading about the different mansions, the different places around him, and I was trying to watch the video, and the little bit I could pick up from Tom Hanks' home was he's in a community that's on a mountain. He's on a point, right? He's on the lowest point. So we know heat rises. The fire was above him, not right where he was. It appeared that he had three sides of his home completely cleared of any brush, trees. There was nothing there. So there wasn't anything to impact the windows. He appeared to have either stucco or concrete siding and a metal roof. So, and I'm not sure about sprinkler system in the lawn. There were trees back to the back side of his home, but again, they were lower. Not that embers couldn't have caught him, but they were lower. And so the mansion above him, total loss.
Right.
But when you look at the before and after pictures, you see vegetation very close to the home on at least two sides, and on the one side there's windows. Well, you have a fire on the outside, it breaks that window, the fire's off to the races on the interior.
Right.
It had a retractable roof, right? Really cool. It's going to fail.
Right.
So there are some differences there, and yes, it is a miracle Tom Hanks' home survived. Very thankful for that. I'm sure him and his family are very thankful for that. But there's also kind of a planned miracle, right? I did all of the things to try to protect my home, and it's still here.
Right.
It's one less insurance claim. And when you look at the insurance side of it, we've talked about in the past, the insurance companies are starting to cancel because the actuarials were completely off. So they're pulling out of markets. And my wife and I just got a letter from Progressive that says, we're canceling your policy because the wildland-urban interface. Your home is not protected. And so we tried to call them. And I'm like, listen, I'm the former fire chief of this area. I know what wildland-urban interface is. I know there's an acre of rock around all of the structures on my property. This is ridiculous. Did not want to talk to me. That person said, call this person. This person said, we can't talk to you. You have to call this person. Basically, they're not going to talk to us. Ran into good friend Eric Strobel at still on the chamber. I'm on the chamber board with him, Prescott Valley Chamber. And he's like, oh, well, Progressive's pulling out of the area. They don't want to insure here. But they can't say, we just don't want to cover the insurance anymore. They have to give you a reason, right, even if the reason is bogus. And so you're going to see that it gets more difficult to get insurance coverage. Your deductibles are probably going to go up because the losses are so significant. You're talking 20 to 50 billion
Well, if I don't get a discount for my property and my goods, there's a problem.
And maybe that's what we should propose to the insurance companies. Listen, if I have goats, I get a discount.
Why not? It's self-evident when you drive onto our place.
Right.
Because some people have criticized it. I got time.
Right.
In terms of, we're not probably ever selling unless, we're not. So I do a little bit. It's like a grid. I've got a grid and I check off when I've done a box.
Okay.
I'm picking up the dead stuff. And that's basically the scrub oak areas that are dead that the goats cleared out. There's no brush. They even eat the pine needles on the ground.
Okay.
There's nothing burnable.
Right.
My biggest challenge is grading it so that we don't have runoff, which we're doing. We're terracing. But we still have our pinyon pine or juniper, so we have that scenery. But we don't have burnable. There's a couple trees near the house, but nothing like the rest of our neighborhood. No. Nothing. And if anything, we would be a model for Firewise, for sure.
Well, exactly. And there was a temple out here that their insurance company was going to raise their rates through the roof or cancel them. And one of the Firewise folks with Prescott Fire Department went out and helped them. And then once they had all that cleaned up, the Prescott Fire Department employee took pictures of it, did all the stuff, wrote a letter to the insurance company, and the insurance company ultimately renewed the policy at the same or similar rate to what they had before, well below.
I would think is that a business? That if it's not, it should be.
Yeah, I mean,
it's an interim company that works between the fire departments and the insurance companies, much like adjusters or anything else. But their specialty is clearing, and whether they're doing it with chainsaws and rakes,
right,
or goats, it doesn't matter. You'd think that would be a business, especially these days.
Well, there is a business for doing the work and clearing it, but having the go between the homeowner or the business owner and the insurance company, specifically for this type of thing, wildland urban interface, to act as that intermediary to say, listen, understand your concerns, here's what's been done, and the commitment to continuing this. And I don't know of any businesses like that. But
sounds like a new insurance company. There's always an opportunity, right? No matter what policy changes, no matter what law is employed, an entrepreneur is going to figure it out, right? And say, okay, I'm going to start an insurance company. I've got $1 billion hedge fund, so we'll be self-funded, no problem. And we're going to create these adjusters that create this Firewise product, whatever. Somebody's going to figure that out.
Well, and
because people get tired of whether it's fees. We're all experiencing fees added to our contracts.
Yes.
It's just some freaking fee that it's a new one you get hit with. Inflation, all these things are hitting us all at once. Well, I'm hoping we'll start to see some guys pop up and go, I got this.
Well, and you can't get on the phone and talk to a person that can help you with anything. So you need somebody that can cut through the red tape and have the conversation. Fortunately, my wife and I were able to get insurance right away once we knew that it was canceled through Safeco. And Safeco actually sent us a letter and said, here's some of the things that we do for wildfire safety. And a very proactive company. So that's the other thing the insurance companies need to do is be a little bit more proactive. But what we know is, just from personal experience, I think, is if you have a claim with an insurance company, you've been paying for 25 years with this insurance company, and now you have a claim for something, and they're like, oh, we don't want to pay that.
Right.
And then you fight them, and then they pay it, and then they cancel your coverage.
Right.
It's all about how much money they can make.
Yeah. Well, they got a board, right? And they have their P&Ls that they have to report to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They have to generate a revenue. I get it. But there's also a compassion side. There's a side that's beyond the business of, your job is to cover these losses. That's what you told me you would do in the agreement that we signed together, is that you would cover these losses. And now you're mad about having to hold up your end of the bargain.
Yep. So new starts. You ready?
You know what?
You're already doing it.
I'm ready. I'm going out tomorrow and move pavers.
Nice.
It's going to be
You
good.
got a website going soon.
Absolutely.
You want to say it again what it's going to be?
LegatoPointConsulting.com will be the website when it's up. And then we also have one for JSO Contracting.com that you can go to and submit if you want to get an estimate from us on doing work, and looking forward to the general contracting side. And I may even through this current venture get some work through Fane's Signature, Anessa, to help keep the site cleaned up as Legato goes back up again. And that would be full circle for me.
Right. Well, I'm excited for you because I've been through the process, right? It's fun.
Yeah.
You work your butt off for a while, but it's rewarding. And I know, again, if you ever need some goats to sub out, I got a few goats for you. I'll toss them out for you.
I may take you up on that. Listen, we can either come in here with a bulldozer or
the goats.
We've got goats and dogs.
To
keep the goats.
As long as it's fenced in. If you got a property fenced in, maybe we can drop them off.
Do you have any fainting goats?
No, they'd be too tempting. I'd be drinking too many beers and shouting.
Yeah. That's I'm like, I wouldn't mind having a fainting goat because it seems like fun.
I would.
Sad for
I'd probably
the goat,
go to jail for causing too many fainting goats.
Right.
But I hope you come back, and I hope we can get you to start talking about leadership and business challenges, because what a great time to be starting new, but then sharing your entrepreneurial experiences with the failures and the wins, especially for young people or anybody starting over.
Right.
They can say, "Oh, it's not just me."
Right.
Right. You got a pretty smart guy here that's been through it all. And to hear your failures, I think people want to talk about their successes, but the failures are always more interesting, how we overcome them. And there's the really gritty stories like, this is what I did.
Well, and here's the thing. I tried to maintain a very positive attitude. Not that frustration or anger doesn't creep in from time to time, but when it does, I tell myself, hey, knock it off. This is not healthy. Let's go do something else. And I'm confident that whatever God's plan is going to be a great thing. And I believe this is it. It's a great new start. And I think my story one day, when I share all the details of it, will hopefully inspire other people that go through a tough time and have a loss of a career, because you're not going to get where you're going if you're looking at the ground kicking the dirt. You got to look ahead, keep your head up. And the good thing is, despite what happened there, right, I can sleep at night and I can look at myself in the mirror because I know I did the right things and what was said about me was not true. And I carry that with me, and I can hold my head high and say, no, I'm ready for that next chapter. No, you know what? I'm done with emergency services. That was a great time in my life. Those are great multiple chapters. Now there's a new one, and I'm very excited about, as I turn to each page, what new is going to be on there.
So this isn't the end of the podcast. This is just starting over.
This is starting over, and if we can get that leadership podcast going, I've got ideas. I have a lot of information. I have ideas on some people to bring in to talk to them about not just starting over, but stretching themselves and pushing themselves further than you think you can go.
Pressure is a privilege.
It is.
Yep. Scott Freitag, thanks for coming in, buddy.
Guy, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Talk to you soon, man.
Yep.
Later.